there's just this idea that being famous and being successful is just something that can happen to anybody. And if you work hard enough. And so I think a lot of times when I first started writing and I published a book, there was, my family, well, are you famous now? Are you making lots of money now? Have you sold thousands of copies of your book? And I'm like, no. So um, I think not just in my family, but I think in the world, I think what people get wrong about my job is that you can make money.
Writers, agents, booksellers, the people who live by books. This is Life on Words, a podcast about the life behind the work.
I'm Terry Heath, and I'm here with Christina Braver. The main question of this podcast: what has your life in books cost you, and what has it given you?
So my life in books has cost me, quite specifically money. It's cost me money. I have not made a profit, and I don't know that I ever will. Maybe, but certainly the amount of money I've lost each year has gotten smaller and smaller. But as writers know, the more you spend, you have to spend more to make more. And so the more I'm spending, the more I need to make to make that gap between what shortening how much I've lost. Maybe someday I will cross the line and make a profit, but it's slow going. It's difficult. So it's definitely cost me just cash, frankly. And it's also cost me a little bit of free time. So when I get in the zone with my writing, it's really difficult for me to pull back it's very difficult for me to write or work from 8 to 5. I will get up in the morning and start working at 7 when I'm really working on a project, and I might stop and make a quick dinner for my family and then go right back to it until 10 o'clock at night. So on these beautiful summer days here in the Pacific Northwest, sometimes it's a little difficult for me to justify that I'm in my office, even with the window open and the sun shining in. I sometimes feel a little bit guilty that I'm not outside enjoying the weather more. But so it has cost me a little bit of free time and that flexibility to put it aside. So when I worked in the corporate world, while I worked hard and worked hours, the main difference from working in the corporate world and working as a writer, working for myself, when you work for yourself, you're always working. Every moment, every hour is a work moment, could be a work hour. When I worked in the corporate world, I typically took my weekends. I didn't work on weekends. I might work long hours during the week, but I definitely didn't work on weekends. And that's not the case now. And um, all the hours are available for me to work. I have a harder time separating having that work-life balance. So it's cost me also a little bit of work-life balance. And that's in short, that's what books have cost me in my life. As far as what it's added or what it's brought to my life, it's given me an opportunity to make a difference, an opportunity to reach people at a time in my life when I am at sort of the final developmental stage. It sort of sounds morose to say that I'm in my final developmental stage of, Erickson and all the different, clinical psychologists and child psychologists, the developmental stages. And so I'm in the final one, which is sometimes called the generative stage, where we have reached our career goals and now we are looking to give something back to the world. That's usually folks around retirement age or older. We've reached that point where instead of striving and driving to make more money, to do more, to be more, to gain more, we're shifting into a place where we want to leave something behind. We want to leave a mark. We want this is what we want to be remembered for. Some of those kinds of thoughts are the things that people in the generative stage of development might be thinking. And again, that is the final stage. And I think that while I'm in my mid-50s, I'm still I think I'm still moving into that stage, and I'm definitely there. And so writing and what books have given me, have added to my life, is certainly an opportunity to reach people and make a difference in their lives regarding the topics that I write about. I write about real sex representation in the romance genre. I write a lot about sexual health. I try to include real sex information in my stories. So connecting with people and knowing that I can still make a difference in someone's life, even though I am not on a corporate ladder or treadmill or making tons of money or famous or recognizable, or what any of those things that I think when we're younger we strive towards. I'm not those things, but I'm still adding value. I'm still making a difference in people's lives. And I think that's been very valuable. That's been a very valuable gift that books and writing has given me.
Can you tell me one story of when you know that you've made a difference in somebody's life because of your writing?
Absolutely. So I get emails back from readers, not all the time, but I have gotten several emails back from readers, and one really stands out from a woman, middle-aged woman, I assume. I don't know, but she had stumbled upon my books, and I have a story, my story, Hawaii for Two. The female main character has some sexual trauma in her history, as is very common for women. And a common consequence of any form of sexual trauma for women is typically an inability to trust, let go, and climax with a partner. So this, patriarchy tells men, if you can't make her come, you're not a man. So this is a pretty common struggle, and it often leads to faking it in the bedroom, which is, inauthenticity in the bedroom is the last place that we don't, the last place where we want to show up inauthentically. We want to be our authentic selves in the bedroom. We're naked physically and literally with our partner, right? So uh, all of these things. This is a very complicated, also very common occurrence in people's romantic lives. And I had a woman reach out to me and say, she read Hawaii for Two. She felt really seen in the female main character. She too had experienced some sexual trauma in her past, struggled to orgasm with her partner, struggled to enjoy sex at all. Fortunately, she had communicated with her partner that orgasm was not something that she was comfortable doing very often, and really struggled to reach that place. And they had sort of gotten to a point where they were thinking, sex is just not going to be the biggest focus of our relationship, and gotten comfortable with that. And she said, she felt so seen in the character. She went on and read a, all of my other books and connected with the stories, connected with some of the sexual challenges that I talk about in those stories, and basically said that she had decided to talk with someone, and that she and her husband had reconnected in a physical way and were enjoying sex in their relationship more than they'd ever enjoyed it before. Now, do I think that my books healed her? No, of course not. But of course not. But of course, being part of her journey, like being there for her at the moment when she was ready to receive some healing, ready to take a step forward. Because not everyone's going to be able to do that. Not everybody wants to do that. Not everybody is ready to do that. If you're struggling in the bedroom, timing is a thing. So, I was so honored to be part of that journey for her, and to be a positive part of that journey for her. And it was such a powerful, powerful email. I actually saved it, and I go back to it periodically to remind myself why I do this. But and that's probably the most memorable one, but I've gotten similar letters from women saying, I felt seen in your story. No one's ever. My first book is the female main character has endometriosis, severe endometriosis, which causes really painful sex. And I've gotten several emails from women saying, nobody has ever written a romance novel about someone with endometriosis like me. And and I think that's really powerful, particularly in the romance genre. since 2019, 2020, the genre has all writers in the genre right now have really tried to be much more inclusive, all orientations, all genders, neurodivergence, diverse female body types, authentic experiences. For example, particularly for people who have experienced sexual trauma or domestic violence, painting those experiences as not something that can be healed by the magical love of the right person, but painting those experiences as impactful to our lives and how they might impact future romantic relationships, and suggesting that there is real treatment, even medication or different things, is needed for healing. So presenting some of those stories as authentic and well researched, that's really something that's very important to the romance genre. So being able to write in a way that is a little less perfect, painting people a little bit more realistically in the romance stories, and telling the story that even though you aren't perfect, even though everything about you isn't conventionally beautiful, even though everything about you in the bedroom doesn't work perfectly, you are still worthy of love. You are still worthy of a happy ending. There's still hope for that. So being part of that journey, that being part of that movement in the romance genre is really powerful and very valuable.
So you go back to these letters. What's in your mind when you're doing that?
Well, sure. I mean, it's a lot of times I go back to them when it's tough and I need encouragement, right? I mean, we I think particularly in the romance genre, the genre is flooded with books, flooded with writers, flooded. And there are so many people out there who would be happy to help you get 1,000 readers or get on a bestseller list for the low price of $2.99 and 5 hours of your time, or whatever. Or we'll do it for you for the low price of $2,999.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that those things aren't legitimate, that some of those things aren't legitimate, some of those things aren't real and helpful and valuable, but there's a lot of charlatans out there. There's a lot of noise in the space. And so as a self-published writer, putting something out there and doing a launch and expecting people to find your book is really it's really difficult. And you can start to feel like what I'm doing isn't important because nobody is reading my books. Not enough people are reading my books or buying my books. So what I'm doing isn't important. And when I started down this road, I didn't do it for the money. I mean, money's great. Who doesn't like money? But I don't need the money. I don't need to make money from my books in order to survive. I'm very fortunate in that way. I'm at that certain point in my life where I've, established and don't need to make money to survive. And so I wanted to do something valuable. I wanted to do something interesting. And so I was able to do that. And while I continue to get that gratification, culture, the world, other writers, the industry, the emails that inundate my inbox every day tell me that money is how I'd be successful in this industry. And I have to remind myself that money is not the way that is probably not the way that I am going to be successful in this industry, because I don't write books that I don't write the books that make all the money. I'm not traditionally published, so I don't have that machine behind me, and I don't write the books that get all the hype, or I'm not in the right place at the right time to get the hype. So yeah, I go back to those letters when I'm really struggling with my imposter syndrome, when I'm really feeling like this is all pointless and useless, and I should just go do something else. I should bake cookies or, just drift away on a farm or something. this retirement age or whatever. So I go back to those letters to remind myself why I'm doing this, because we get so many messages, particularly here in the US, we get so many messages that money is how we measure success. And it just isn't. It wasn't in the beginning and it isn't now.
Has anything ever made you want to walk away?
No, no, not yet. I mean, not yet. The imposter syndrome is tough, and sometimes it does feel like, you get to those places where I give up. Someone, I'll read a book that's wildly successful, and I'm like, why is this book so wildly successful? If this book can make $10,000, why can't my book? And that comparison is the thief of joy. Um, that old kind of meme saying. It's absolutely true. And so I have to really, really be cautious when I compare myself to others. I don't know what that author has done. I don't know how much money that author has spent to get into the places that they are, um, and social media lies, all the things that are on social media are not true. Not true. We curate what we put out into the world in social media. And so I really have to be cautious and make sure that I have the right lens whenever I'm looking at social media, or and I really need to make effort not to compare myself to other authors, because that just steals all of our joy. But it's easy to do. And I think if there was a time, or if there's anything that would probably make me quit, it would be, if something like that, just doing that too much, letting myself get sucked into that comparison and then feeling like this was all pointless.
Mhm.
I'm just gonna quit. But that hasn't helped. That hasn't happened yet. But my guess is that if there is something that makes me quit, it would probably be that, or just like, my life. My kids are in their young adulthood, and they'll be moving out into the world, and my husband and I may decide to, I don't know, move to Europe or something, and then I might decide to do something else. And so, um, if I did stop, it would probably be either life external to my writing world made me stop, or I didn't protect myself and I let the imposter syndrome take over.
Mhm. So maybe not envy, but is there another author whose career you sort of use as a model or want to emulate?
Um, Career. So I actually don't know. There's an author that I talk a lot about. I don't know that much about her career. I don't know that I necessarily want to model my career after hers, but the author is Kennedy Ryan. She's a Black author writing romance, steamy, different steam levels, steamy, and then also maybe a little less steamy. But her reading her books was one of those catalyst moments where I said, "Oh, I can read romance and I can say something to people in those romance novels. It isn't just fluff." She writes romance novels, and in the same way that I try to include real information and experiential information about sexual health, Kennedy Ryan includes a lot of real information and experiential information about racism. And it sort of dawned on me that there are people who would read her novels and learn something, get a little bit of a window into what it's like to be a Black woman in America through reading Kennedy Ryan's stories. And they might either feel seen or get educated. If, perhaps, someone, if I'm not Black, I might have an opportunity to get educated about that experience. And, with e-readers, there's lots of people reading romance novels and nobody knows what they're reading. People who might not typically be exposed to information might pick up a romance novel and read it and find out that your husband can abuse you and sexually assault you. Uh, read a story about a situation that might occur in the lives of a marginalized community that I, as a white woman, I don't have an insight into that experience maybe in the same way. So she was really the author that I noticed and sort of fell in love with, she helped me to fall in love with the idea that romance is a lot more than just a happily ever after or two people falling in love and having intimate time or less intimate time. And then everything works out and they get married and have a baby. Um, Kennedy Ryan really helped me to see that there can be a higher purpose with these stories. And she's not the only one. Lots of other writers are doing it more and more now. As I mentioned, now that we're having more authentic stories and a lot more diverse representation, people are saying real things in their romance novels. And I think that's really valuable. But Kennedy Ryan is someone that I look to, and she's been on the Today Show and Good Morning America, and I think some of her books have been picked up, have been optioned by like Amazon and MGM Studios or something. And while that's lovely for her, I don't necessarily want those things for me. I'm not sure that I can handle the stress and anxiety of that potentially, but so I don't know that I necessarily, and that's really all I know about her career. And so I don't know that I really envy her career, but she was interviewed on Fresh Air recently that I would probably really like. But other than that, I think it's just that I model my writing after hers in a sense that I want to tell real stories that can provide real help and information in other people's lives and wrap it in a in the story about love. It's really not that different from a lot of other stories, but I try to really put that emphasis in there. And again, she was the first romance writer that it struck me, oh, I could do I could do this. And and that was part of the impetus for why I started writing.
Have you thought about pursuing your writing in a different path instead of romance?
Not really. I did technical writing informally. I have a certificate in technical writing, but I didn't work as a technical writer, though I did a lot of technical writing in my corporate career. And which is one of the reasons that my husband, whenever I got laid off with around COVID time, like so many people, and my husband and I decided that I would stay home and that I wouldn't pursue another job. And and I said, well, I got to do something or I'll helicopter our children into the ground, right? And I need something to put my energy into. And he said, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I want to read romance novels all day. And he said, well, you're smart. You're a good writer. Why don't you write one? And so I did. And so um, I definitely enjoy that kind of writing. I do some writing on Medium, but it's all related to the sex positivity and the sexual health and sex positivity information that I'm researching. That what I write on Medium is all related to that information. So it's not fiction. It's not stories. It's commentary on different cultural things related to sex and sexual health. But other than that, no, I don't have really any interest. I am probably going to write a craft book. I'm working on putting my thoughts together to write a writing craft book about how to write intimacy with intention and things for steamy romance writers or steamy intimate scene writers, things for them to think about so that we don't contribute to some harmful sexual myths in Western culture. And so I'll probably be working on that. But again, even though it's not a romantic story, it's certainly romantic story adjacent. But as far as like writing in another genre, writing journalistically, I've never been tempted to do that. I don't think I would ever do that.
So you've had some letters and some emails that have been positive. Have there been negative responses?
No, not really. I mean, some reviews, some book reviews. I don't always read all of my book reviews. I read a lot of them, but I don't always read all of them. And some book reviews have been, a bit challenging. There is one that I famously have talked about, so my book, Formula One Noel, is right back there in the green. It's obviously Formula One Noel. He's a Formula One driver. Noel would indicate it happens at Christmas. If you know anything about Formula One, you'll know that there is no Formula One race at Christmas time. Formula One takes a break from around November to March. So that's the time period that this book takes place in. And I did get a an email from a writer saying that, or from a reader saying that they were disappointed in my book because there was no Formula One race in it. And I didn't know the first thing about Formula One, which to a certain extent, there was some truth there. The reason that I wrote that book, I wrote it during COVID, during shutdown. My son he would play video games in the afternoon behind me. My husband was working in this space in the office, and I had kind of made a makeshift deck space in our formal room. And there's an extra TV in there, and my son was playing video games. And so he would hear me in my writing meetings and working with other writers. And he's like, "You should write a book about a Formula One driver." And I said, "I don't know anything about Formula One." He's like, "Well, I do. I know everything, and he does know lots and lots and lots about Formula One. So when I told him that reviewer said that all the Formula One information in the book was wrong, he was like, "Well, we have to write her back and tell her she's wrong." And I was like, no, we're not writing anybody back." But it was just he was pretty offended, and I was offended on his behalf. But I think that review, 1-star review, and the person didn't finish the book. And so in their review, there were some things that they complained about that actually made sense if the person had finished the book. They would have those things that they complained about would have been revealed. So, some of that stuff you have to let go. But for the most part, I have not had a lot of negative backlash. So fingers crossed. I'm grateful, and fingers crossed it doesn't come. But you're going to have bad reviews. There are going to be people that the books don't resonate with, or the writing style doesn't resonate with. I don't read Stephen King. And if I read a Stephen King book, I probably wouldn't give it a very good review because I don't like horror. And so, that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with Stephen King. It just means it's not something that resonates with me. And that's the same thing with my books. There's some people who love them, some people who don't love them, and that's okay.
Okay, so your process. What's your writing process? Do you outline? Do you pants? What's your typical approach?
I think I'm what people call a plotzer. So I'm a little bit of both. I do
Right.
I do plot a bit. What I do initially, I start with what is the sexual health problem that I want to talk about. So, for example, the work in progress that I have right now, which I've shelved a little bit, but I will come back to it. Is a new adult romance, which means the main characters are in college. And the reason that I wanted to write about that age group is because I have been reading a lot and studying a lot about men right now in the United States, ages 18 to 28, and some of the struggles that they're really coming up against with the masculine messaging, toxic masculine messaging, and then just masculine messaging. Their masculinity in and of itself is not toxic. There are certainly toxic messages that get associated with masculinity. That's real. And patriarchy, and then the things their fathers taught them, and what's happening with women, and the changes that the advancements for women, and the movement towards equality for women, the impact that's had on our young men and their expectations. And I think they're things that I've read. Sometimes I think some of them feel as if the rug has been pulled out from under them. I was told that I'm supposed to be a provider, but it's impossible for me to find a job to provide. I went to college. I have a 4-year degree. I get out. My starting salary, I can't even afford rent, much less rent and food for a partner, and much less rent, food for myself, and then extra money to take a prospective partner on a date. Some of these expectations that have been so ingrained culturally as to what men are supposed to do and what men are supposed to be like. I think the young men right now are really struggling with some of that and trying to rewrite the rules in a way that they're not really sure how to. And so I was so intrigued about that age group. I wanted to write at that time. So I am working on a male character who is the male main character and the female main character are both very successful college soccer players, and grappling with that idea that he's a great college soccer player. He did this thing, he had rescued a kid and it got onto social media and hype, all this hype about him. And now people think he is this man among men, this hero. And he's sort of grappling with what does that mean for me? I'm just the same. I was just in the right place at the right time. And so I wanted to explore sort of that experience for him. And that's what I'm working on. So I take an issue that I think is something that I want to explore, something I want to learn more about. And I think about who are the characters that would be in this issue. So again, with Hawaii for two, she's past her college age, but she's still struggling again to climax with a partner. So I really wanted to address the issue of women who struggle to climax with a partner, not on their own necessarily, but specifically with a partner. And then the patriarchal concept that it's a man's responsibility to make a woman climax in the bedroom, in that situation. And how does a man deal with that when his partner, it has nothing to do with him. It's her story and her journey. So I pick characters. I think about what situation I want them to be in. Maybe the Hawaii for two actually came about a little bit because the male main character in that book was in my series, and I finished the series, and then I sort of realized that Levi should probably get a story. But the series was finished. I didn't want to write any more in the series, but here's Levi kind of twisting out here. So I decided to write a standalone book, and that's Hawaii for two, and Levi is the main character in it. So my process really starts with what is the sexual issue that I want to investigate? What are the characters that I think could really help me highlight? What I want to highlight? I look at goal, motivation, and conflict, the wants and needs, both internal and external. I really try to get a picture of them as people. I think about what happened to them in their childhood that made them sort of the way that they are. One of the things that Kate in Hawaii for two struggles with, she's the middle child. She's got an older sister and a younger sister who are thin and pretty and all the things. And she is not those things. And she struggles with how she fits into her family in that way. And so I wanted to think about what are some things that happened to her in her childhood. What's her relationship like with her older sister? And her older sister is very bossy and very, in charge. And then she has a younger sister, the baby, who kind of always gets everything that she wants and doesn't always think about the consequences in the family. And so what were their relationships like as children, and how does that impact the way that they interact as adults now in the novel? So I think about a lot of those things as I'm planning. So then once I have some picture and idea about who I want these characters to be, the issues I want them to struggle with, the goals I want them to have, and the accomplishments I want them to achieve, then I start to think about plot. What's the situation? I look at what's a fun trope that I like, that I'd like to write. What romance novels have a lot of tropes in them for great reasons. So I think about, well, what's the trope that I want to lean into? And so then I'll think about those and what sort of plot points are driven by that trope. And then once I have that plan, then I'll start writing. And oftentimes I have in the past gone sideways. Like I'll be writing a chapter and trying to force these characters to do something, and the characters are just not having it. It's just not working, that it doesn't fit with their personality. It doesn't make sense that they would choose to do this instead of this. And I have to sort of stop and decide, well, am I going to change the character's personality, or am I going to change what they're doing and how this plot moves forward? And it's always that I change the plot and how the character moves forward. And in that way, I'm a little bit of a pantser. I get that sort of discovery of what's going to happen next. I don't have everything outlined, but I do try to have, these are the beats. This is what I want to happen in the dark moment. This is what I want to happen as the grand gesture of bringing them all back together. These are the things that I want to do in the middle of the story when I really want them to investigate whatever the sexual issue is that they're struggling with. So I'll have high level ideas about that, but I don't, this happens, this happens, this happens. I don't typically do plotting to that level.
Where do you find these high level ideas? Where do you come up with, I want to write about this?
Well, oftentimes I'm reading a lot. So my husband and I both read a lot. We both have backgrounds in psychology, and so we read a lot of nonfiction books about relationships and sexual health. And he reads. He's a data scientist, and so he reads a lot of also nonfiction about data science and data and cooking and all kinds of things. And we see a nonfiction book that we think, oh, that looks interesting, and we read that, and then it'll spark an idea. So my second book, the female main character in my second book, she's a chef, and she cooks what she calls comfort food that won't kill you. And I got the idea of a chef like that from reading all the Michael Pollan books about food. So um, I I I was my husband and I both are reading all these books by Michael Pollan. If you're not familiar, he writes some great books about food and the history of different cooking styles and dishes, and they're all great. And he also has a great book about psychedelics that's super informative. I encourage everybody to read it. It's a great book. He's a great writer. So I was like, I'm reading all these books, and I said, I want to write a character. Maybe I'll make this character a chef, and maybe she'll cook this kind of way that's a little different from So I could be reading anything. Mary Roach is another author who writes nonfiction, and she wrote a book called Bonk. Most of her books have like one title words, or the title is one word. And her book Bonk is all about sex, but it's sex in the animal population. And so she takes, I think, 4 different animals or species and talks about the sex life of that animal. And I was reading her book Bonk, and it sort of hit me all of the similarities between within the animal kingdom, all of the mating rituals that we do as humans have a lot of counterparts in other species in the animal kingdom. Some of this, it's a little, it starts to get a little kind of eerie. You're like, oh, humans do that, and humans do that. And wow, is that why men do that? And so I have a character, actually book 5, the female main character, her name is Angela. She's a vet tech, a large animal vet tech, and she talks a lot about animal husbandry, and she uses these ideas from breeding horses to explain why her friends' boyfriends are behaving the way that they're behaving. She talks about them in very, this is the mating ritual that the animal does. And she talks about the mating rituals of the American male are fascinating to her, and those kinds of things. So that character and sort of how she kind of showed up in the world, or what that came from reading Mary Roach's book Bonk. So it can come from anything. It isn't just the sexual health books that I'm reading that feed into the character. It really can be from anything that I'm reading. And I was reading For the Love of Men by Liz Plank, and I read Guyland by Michael Kimmel, which are about young men. And that's when I got sort of the idea, I want to write about these college age kids, and I want to young adults. They're not kids. These college age young adults, and the challenges of becoming a man in that space, because the boy club is really big in the college age space. The rules of the bro culture, you don't go against your friends, and we see it in the world. One of the bigger examples that internationally publicized about 5 years ago, there was a gang rape of a woman by several people who were on the Canadian juniors hockey team. And that they recently, just this past summer in 2025, there were 5 men that were on trial, and they were acquitted. But it was a very big trial and a lot of conversation. And what was really evident to anyone who was paying attention at all is that these men were going along with their friends. And that doesn't make it right, and it doesn't make it okay. They got a text to show up in a hotel room with a girl who wanted to have sex with lots of guys. And they showed up, and when it seemed like maybe she didn't want to have sex with all of them, they didn't get her out of there. They didn't stop their friends from from having sex with her. They just took themselves out of the situation, but they didn't help her and they didn't stop their friends. And that's bro culture. You don't do that. And scientists and sociologists and psychologists, they study this, they have this documented. It is a thing in the world, and it's difficult to go against it. There are boys that go against it, but it is a thing. And that was so interesting to me. And so reading about that, I'm raising a boy in that age range. And so I'm not really raising him anymore. He's an adult. He's raised as far as I've done all I can do. But I love a boy in that age range, and I want to try to understand, what are the things that he's grappling with in culture. Um, so yeah, though it comes from all my inspiration and ideas really come from all the different things that I read. And then of course sometimes the romance novels I'm reading, I think, oh, well, this guy's pretty sexy. Maybe I'll change him this way. I wonder I should make my main character do that or something like that. So inspiration comes from all the places.
Has the writer Christine changed from what pre-writer Christine was?
I don't think so. I mean, I'm sure as we evolve, we change, but I've always been outspoken. I've always been vocal about things that other people can't usually talk about. I've always been loud. I've always been um, unapologetic, and I still am. So as far as changed me, I don't really think so. Maybe I smile more. I don't know. So I don't. I think I'm the same person. I'm the same person I was before and now. I just have I have a different platform now than I had before. But yeah. My therapist says she says the one word that I think of when I think about you is the word why. You always ask why for everything in one way or another. Anything happens, you want to know why. And she's absolutely right. And that I've always been that way. It's why I have a degree in clinical psychology. It's why I have read all the books I've read and do all the things that I do. It's because I'm always asking why. And I've always been that way. And so that certainly hasn't changed. And is probably one of the reasons that I was drawn to writing fiction because I'm so interested in trying to understand these characters and why they make the choices they make and do what they do.
What do you know now that you would not want to tell your younger self because you feel that they needed to not know it?
What do I know now that I would not want to tell there's so many things I would want to tell my younger self, but things that I wouldn't want to tell my younger self. Um, I I don't know, probably something around, as I've gotten older, I have gotten much more fearful about things. And so I know now that you can walk out that door and not come back. And, it's much more visceral, maybe particularly since I've had children, that it's much more visceral that how much control I do not have over myself, my body, the world I live in, the political climate I live in, the choices I make from day to day, my safety, like how much control I actually have is quite minimal. But at my younger self, absolutely believed that I could control my future and I could make it happen, and I was gonna be this and I was gonna be that and all of that drive. And so while I while I'm glad that I've grown into the wisdom of understanding the world a little bit more, and it can be a relief in a lot of ways to know that I just don't have control. I don't want my younger self to know that. I'm glad that my younger self was sort of ignorant to all of that because otherwise I probably would have not pushed and taken the risks that I took. I moved away from my family. I'm originally from the southeastern United States, and that culture is can be, and my whole family for generations behind me, we're all from the southeastern United States, the Nashville area, and so that culture can be very closed. You can leave, but you need to come back. And It's part of sort of the expectation. And so moving away from your family is something, it's a silly little lark that young people do when they need to push the limits or something, but they will come back to the fold as they should. And so I didn't do that. I left the fold. I didn't come back. And that took some bravery, and that took some risk, and that took some faith and trust that I could control my future, and that everything I could make it okay. Everything was going to work out okay. And now I'm like, oh, will everything work out okay? I'm not sure. So
You said there are things you would tell your younger self. What are some of those things?
that I know now that my younger self did, I would encourage my younger self to living in anxiety is not good. There is help if you are really anxious about things. It's not normal. You should go talk to somebody. I took way too long. As someone with an education in clinical psychology who had served as a social worker and a therapist, you would think that I would know that, these things, but it took a long time for me to realize that what I was experiencing was anxiety. And I think I would probably tell myself that all those mommy groups, they are all this, all the organic food, all the mommy groups, all of the right events, all of the right instruments, all of the right classes and teachers and blah, 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 all the things that I twisted myself into a pretzel to accomplish so that my children could have the best chance ever, would only end up hurting us all in the end. I think I would like to tell that young mother to just chill out. It's all going to be fine. Like, do the best you can. And at the end of the day, that's good enough. Love your children. Try to help them do what they want to do. Try to teach them right from wrong. Try to keep them safe. Try to make them laugh and smile and give them joy. But at the end of the day, if you are not constantly feeding them 100% organic food, it likely won't be the end of the world. And there were days when I certainly thought that it might be. So, yeah, all of those things. I think I would most go back and tell my younger self that maybe to just cut myself a break now and then.
What does everyone get wrong about your job, what you do?
That it makes money. So again, I grew up outside of Nashville, Tennessee, and it's a little bit funny. It's been years, decades since I've lived there. So I could be wrong about it's changed a lot, and so I could be wrong about the way that it is now. But at the time when I was growing up, people came to Nashville and made a career for themselves. And people would, get off a Greyhound bus and with their guitar and a dream, and, somehow come into Nashville, and a few years later they would make it happen. They'd cut a record and be on their way. And I'm sure that happens now, but just not, it's much, much, much more complicated than that. We were still living in the days where I wasn't still living in the days, but we weren't that far from the days where Loretta Lynn and Johnny Cash were playing at the Ryman Auditorium for the Grand Ole Opry. And the Ryman Auditorium doesn't have a green room. And so they would walk across the alley to Tootsie's Bar and Lounge in between sets and sit in the back and have a Coke. And anybody and their brother could walk in and go up and say, "Hi, I'm Peter and you're Johnny Cash." We weren't that far from when fame could be normalized. And fame was normal, and anybody with a dream and enough work ethic could be famous. And we're not in that world anymore, I don't believe. There's plenty of very talented people who work their butts off and get nowhere. In fact, the huge, huge statistically vast majority of people are super talented, work their butts off, and don't reach the dream. But, growing up, my family, there was this idea that I can sing. I have a voice, and I took classes when I was young. I took lessons and all these things when I was young, and I sang a lot, and I can sing. And my family was, "Oh, you're going to be a rock star. You're going to be a country music singer. You're going to be famous. We're going to see you on stage one day." And there's just this idea that being famous and being successful is just something that can happen to anybody, and if you work hard enough. And so I think a lot of times when I first started writing and it published a book, there was, my family, well, "Are you famous now?" are you making lots of money now? Have you sold thousands of copies of your book? And I'm like, no. So I think not just in my family, but I think in the world, I think what people get wrong about my job is that you can make money. And they get wrong that it's just writing books. If my job were just writing books, I would be so happy. But my job is not just writing books. My job is marketing. My job is weeding through emails to figure out who's a charlatan and who's for real, and second guessing everybody and trying not to click on a spam email. And, my job is figuring out how to be on social media without going absolutely out of my mind. And, all those things those are all things that are my job also that I don't like. But I think a lot of people are like, well, don't you have a new book coming out soon? No, I'm recovering my series. I'm trying to figure out how to run an ad on Facebook. I'm trying to no, I don't have a new book coming out. So, yeah.
What's the most unglamorous thing you did this week for your career?
How I struggled to put up a tent at a book fair at an open air by myself. That's not true. Your friend came over and helped me, but that was clearly humiliating a little bit, trying to put this tent up by myself. I should be able to do this. It really shouldn't be this hard. That was probably the most unglamorous thing I have done this week for my career. Yeah. Carry my table and chair. I don't have somebody to carry it for me. So.
And keep it from blowing away.
Right. Exactly.
So what is a day like in your writing life?
Typically, it can vary depending on if I'm writing a new story. Right now, a day in my life of writing. So I typically get up pretty early, eat breakfast. I try to be at my desk between 7 and 8, unless I'm working out. Then I still might come in and maybe work at my desk between 7 and 8 and open my email and answer emails. Between all of us here, I loathe email. Like, I don't like it. I think it's a PTSD thing. To use the term probably too loosely, so many bad things come to us in email and not enough good things come to us. Like, people say, John Gottman, who is a very famous relationship researcher, says that in a successful marriage, a successful romantic relationship, you have to say 5 positive things to your partner or about your partner for every negative thing you say about or to your partner. I know it's tough. It's really hard, but in order that's an indicator, if you have at least 5 or more positive things to however many negative things you might say to your partner, that's a good sign that relationship is going to be successful. And email is definitely way more negative garbage coming at us than positive stuff. So email is usually not, I kind of want to get it over with. Eat the frog for breakfast is a saying. If I know I have to eat a frog that day, I'm going to eat it for breakfast, get it over with, right? So I look at email first, and then I'll usually try to work out or do something like that, something to get my body moving. And then I'm probably back at my desk from 10 until around 1:30. My son goes to work at 1:30, and it's kind of at 1:30 in the afternoon. And it's kind of been our joke that it's my lunchtime when he goes to work. So him leaving is sort of a whistle for me. I'll go make myself something to eat. And then I'm back at my desk and I'm either editing a story or writing new words. I have a sprint partner that I meet with twice a week, and we for about 3 hours in the morning. And so if it's a sprint day, I will be with him. He's writing his story. I'm writing my story. We're just kind of helping each other. If there's a plot point issue, we'll help each other spitball. All the way down to just providing like that moral support as we both struggle with imposter syndrome and trying to make all these decisions for ourselves in a business that we don't completely understand. So just trying to do the best you can in this business. So then, and I will usually write until about 6 or 6:30. I'll work at what I'm working on for the book. until about 6:30, and that's when I'll put it away and go and make dinner. But if I'm editing a book, if I'm at the final stages of a new work, I might after dinner I may come back to my office and continue to edit or write or work until about 9:30. So that's not typical. I mean, that's not always. It's kind of what's happening right now because of my kind of I want to go through my series and I'm punching up some of the structure. So right now that's a little bit more typical. But it's email in the morning, some exercise to get my body moving, really hardcore focused at my desk, and then a quick break, and then I'm back at it. So I have to schedule day. Tuesdays are usually my flex days. So if I'm doing something other than really heads down writing, I'm probably going to do it on Tuesday. And I have doctor's appointments on Tuesdays. I do podcast recordings on Tuesdays. I do things like that. Or there are Tuesdays my flex day where I give myself permission to not be so heads down at my desk and run errands, go to the grocery store, stuff like that. Usually do that on Tuesdays.
Do you give yourself any rules about shutting down, shutting off, life balance?
No, I need to. Definitely. My husband works late. He doesn't get home until 7:30 usually, so that encourages me to work until I know I have to get dinner started. So it might be even kind of close to ready by the time he gets home. But I need more balance. I need more work-life balance. But I'm one of those, I'm a checker offer. I can be really motivated by checking things off my list. And so if I have edit your two lips, my first in series on my checklist, sometimes I will work 10-hour days until I'm finished with that edit so I can check that off my list, right? So sometimes the tyranny of the checklist, I it's I have not mastered the art of disciplining myself to say this is enough. I'm stopping here. I will come back at it tomorrow. Sometimes I can do that when I'm writing new words. I'm much better at it. Like if I'm just writing new words, I'm first drafting, I'm much better at work-life balance. I can let that go and come back because my brain needs time to figure out what they're going to do next. And I follow Stephen King's, I believe it was Stephen King that said he would, if he was having a problem with a story, he would go to sleep. He would think about it intentionally while he was falling asleep. And then when he woke up in the morning, he would write down just sort of stream of consciousness, everything that he thought. And then he would try to make sense of it, try to find the solution to his problem in that. But he talked about it, he called it the boys in the basement. And so like while he was sleeping, the boys in the basement would work on the plot point he was struggling with. And so I sort of subscribe to that idea too. So I have to shut down when I'm writing new words so I can give my brain time to think, well, what really is going to happen here? What's the next thing? So I'm better at work-life balance then, but we're editing a story, you have to keep the whole thing in your mind as you move forward. What did she say? What did she call this in chapter 2? And here I am, I'm in chapter 48. How did she spell that person's name in chapter 42 or chapter 2? I better spell it the right way in chapter 48, right? So you have to keep all of that in here, and it's a bit crazy making. So I don't have good work-life balance in those situations. There's so many people out there that tell you, if you just do this, you will get this. And you need to do that. What do you mean you're not on social media? What do you mean you're not spending $500 to $1,000 in Amazon ads? What do you mean? How do you expect to be successful? You should be on TikTok. You should be on Instagram. You should be on YouTube. You should. And I often tell people, you should never do what somebody tells you to do when they start a sentence with you should. That should be your first red flag. Don't do that. Maybe that's not the best solid advice, but typically someone telling you should is often, I often tell people, don't start the sentence that way. I will likely not do what you're telling me to do. So I think, I can get really caught up in all of that, and taking the time to say, these are the things that I'm going to focus on. I set limits. This is how much money I'm going to spend on ads. I'm not going to go over. I reached my budget like mid-month this year. In July, I did not up it, much to probably Facebook's sadness, but I did not up it. this is my budget. This is what I'm going to spend. This is how much time. I only go on social media when I have something to say. I don't do a lot of DMing on social media because I just don't have that much to say in a DM on social media. So, these are the limits that I have set for myself. And maybe those are my work-life balance limit. If I have work-life balance limits, those are them. But I really try to keep to those boundaries and not get caught up in all of the things that I could do to do, because I could do a million things to better my career, but they may not work.
You've talked about what this life has cost you. On a scale of 1 to 10, has it been worth it?
Yes. Yeah. 10 worth it. Maybe 9. No, I mean, it's definitely been worth it. I would do it again. My husband might say differently, but he wouldn't. He would not say differently. I need to give him more credit because he would absolutely not say differently. He's very supportive, and he's always been very supportive of me doing this. And I think he's very proud, and that feels good. So it's absolutely been worth it. It's not like we've lost tons and like I've spent tons and tons of money that I didn't get back. I would have probably spent that money on something else to take up my time if I wasn't doing this. So it's not something that has impacted the cash money that it has cost us. Is not something that has impacted our lives in a negative way. So, and I think my brain is good. My brain is stimulated thinking about all of these things. And I think to a certain extent, I think it makes me interesting. My husband he's a data scientist. He's a tech nerd. I think he has a certain persona and personality where he works. And they call him an old man. He's probably decades older, at least a decade, if not 2 decades older than everyone else he works with. So he has this sort of persona of being this kind of person. And then they find out what I do. And I think there's sort of a record scratch moment sometimes, your wife does what? They sort of, and I think we've gotten a little bit of street cred. I think he's gotten a little bit of street cred out of being married to a steamy romance novelist. So I think it's absolutely worth it.
Life on Words is produced by Terry Heath and Follow the Rabbit LLC. New conversations post every Wednesday. Follow the show wherever you listen and find every episode at lifeonwords.com.